Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. Guys, we've got a serious question to answer today. Should Saph be fired? Now, I don't normally do a performance review over YouTube comments, but I did get one in from someone else yesterday. Please fire Saph. That dude straight up sucks. He's trying to get Wix nerfed since it helps non-whales compete with him. Saph is awful. So we're going to take a look, actually, because I hadn't watched it yet. Saph did a video yesterday basically saying that Wixwell's shield growth is a terrible coding mistake by Raid Shadow Legends and Plarium, and they should have done it in a different way. So we're going to take a look at what he's thinking here. But ultimately, should we be able to achieve super easy one keys with a champion like Wixwell? That's Saph's question. Or not so much should we be able to do it, it's has it been coded in a silly way? Now, I've done a bunch of videos so far on Wixwell. That's the first thing. And I think that uncovering some of the cool stuff about Wixwell was great. Definitely, you know, when we were throwing it out there saying this fusion's a good one to pick up, I thought so before I even knew what he was capable of doing in Clan Boss, before I'd done a load of testing on him. So that was kind of like out there and apparent. But the more I've played around with him, the more viable, I guess, he is for a whole bunch of Clan Boss content. And for the players coming up through the game, you know, being able to one key Clan Boss is a huge landmark in your kind of like progression. Now, I guess, should it be as easy as it is a question. If you want to ask that question, though, I will say, should a budget unkillable be as easy as it is? Should an unkillable exist ever in the game? Because I don't think it's actually any different. Or is it any different? I guess it takes a bit more in terms of mechanics and stuff, but ultimately it achieves the same thing. And then follow on from that, it's like, should you therefore be able to do some of the crazy stuff that is going on in Hydra? We're kind of going round in circles here on different topics, but basically it's the same topic. Yeah, you know, should you be able to get these kind of like multiple billion points, 100 billion key here from Predator in my Clan Boss fight right now on Nightmare Clan Boss with Trunda breaking the game. I guess that's my biggest thing around should Saph be fired here or not, is are we being consistent with, you know, what's broken and what is not broken? Let's have a quick listen to what Saph's got to say about this topic, because what I will say is Saph's got a whole bunch of shit comments here, probably rightly so, because people get very protective when they've got something that works. Like, you know, me, I just got my Clan Boss going on that team. I don't want to have to change it now. And for someone who couldn't do Clan Boss at all, it's even more protective and sensitive because they've just finally got something that works for them. So let's see what Saph's got to say about this.
Shield growth and why the way it has been implemented is bad game design and what they should do to fix it. We've all seen a lot of the team videos coming out from all the different content creators. I know Bronco has been trying to break the game in Hydra and in Clan Boss using various different rays. We've seen Hell Hades do a bunch of different Clan Boss teams that you can easily get to Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss with the Vault Keeper Wixwell, and it pretty much revolves around his ability here to grow shields. Now, it's not very clear from this in-game description exactly how he is doing it and the way it is working, but effectively the best way to describe how this works is the value of the first 20 shield growths will be equal to the value of the 21st shield growth. Effectively, you are multiplying a multiplier, and it's pretty awful the way it's been programmed.
Yeah, what's quite interesting here is we all thought that Wixwell's shield growth was not good at the start because we did a straight visual comparison to Brogni, the way Brogni does it. Brogni gives you a much chunkier amount of shield right at the start because his is based off of his damage that he's doing. So actually, if you're able to hit harder with Brogni, you get a fatter shield. Whereas Wixwell grows the shield you've got by a percentage, and the bigger the base amount of shield, the more growth you're going to get. And that's why you're able to kind of like exponentially grow shield with Wixwell.
And you'll quickly see why. I'm going to do a very detailed breakdown of exactly how this works and my suggestion as to how they can fix it without necessarily making the champion pointless. Because
okay, so he's actually not just coming out here saying nerf. He's saying like a change, and that's important as well.
We've seen in the past whenever they've tried to deal with excessive shield problems, A big one that comes to mind is, of course, Corpulent Cadaver. This used to be the original Infinity Comp damage dealer, where he will do damage equal to the value of the shield, and they decided to, in the end, cap it. And I will be honest, the cap that they applied to this was so extreme that Corpulent Cadaver stopped getting used. My suggestion when this guy needed to be fixed was to cap it, but not so extreme, to still allow him to do pretty good damage in different content areas, but they went pretty extreme. Another example where we had a shield growth mechanic which got out of control very quickly was Emic Trunkheart's A1, and they chose to cap this before he became available in the game in the test server. So therefore, before it was publicly released, they nerfed him, and pretty much whenever anyone talks about Emic's shield growth, they always say that they nerfed it aggressively, even though, to be honest, his shield growth wasn't that crazy. But here you can see here it's increasing the shield value by 25%. So it had the similar way that Wixwell is doing it, and they just decided to cap it, which meant that the shield growth pretty much was largely irrelevant.
This is actually what I'm most worried about. So I was on a conversation with the dev team, and we weren't even talking about Wixwell, to be honest. We were talking about the kind of whole Trunder thing, and the way clan bosses just Hydra clan bosses being kind of just like ridiculed right now with the kind of like silly teams that are out there, the silly damage numbers like I just showed you. And they brought up shield growth. So the raid devs brought up shield growth and said, should there ever be an infinite shield in this game? And it felt very much like they were leaning towards no, there should not. But they didn't say they were nerfing anything. They just made it clear that they didn't feel like that was a thing. So I'm hoping they don't do something like this to Wixwell. I hope if they do change it in any way, they change it in a Brogni style way, because this part of his kit now for Emic is completely useless. Emic's still really usable for some of his other elements of his kit, but this part, which was kind of, it was totally broken when it was released to the test server, but it could have still been fun. And they just capped it way too hard.
Now, how is Wixwell working? Well, on a very basic level here, how is Wixwell working? He will extend the value of shields depending on the number of buffs in which he increases the duration on, right? So the first part increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, and then he will increase the value of the shields equal to the number of buffs extended. So if you have 5 buffs on a target, it will increase it by the percentage that is hidden in the game code times 5. Now, just to be clear on how this is working.
So more buffs and bigger base shields means you extend it larger and quicker. And then once you get it to a point where it's got to a big fat number, it's almost impossible to hit through it. That's the logic.
It is a target by target basis. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't add up all this is working. Stuff. So what I've got here is sort of an exponential calculation to show you how the shield is growing and why it is coded in a very poor way. Let's start off with a value of 30,000. So this shield value here.
So let's just bear in mind, so you get a value from your actual shield set, and it needs to be shield set, not bolster set, because bolster set cannot be extended or grown. But you get a value from your shield set. I'm just curious what mine is actually. So my Lydia is my shield champion in my team. She's got a 78,000 HP pool, and shield set gives us 30% of that. So I get about a 20k-ish shield from her, and then Wixwell applies a shield as well, which gives us 2 shields to grow. If I didn't have the second shield, it's much harder to do, but Wixwell applies a shield proportional to his defense. So I'd say Saph's base numbers here, once you've applied both of those shields, are probably not far off. For the average player, it's probably somewhere between 20 and 40k, depending on how good your gear is and how good your shields are and stuff.
Here, this is a base shield. So like we start with a shield set, or maybe we start with an initial shield from another shield application, maybe his A3, for example. Let's go with a 30,000 shield start. Now, one thing to note is don't start with a bolster set, because bolster is a protected set. You can't actually increase the strength of that. So a few people have said, why doesn't it work with bolster set? It's because of the way that bolster is completely immune from any sort of modifications, including duration or strength of shields. You should never use a bolster shield. So when we start with this, let's just assume we have 5 buffs on the target.
So let's just think 5 buffs, 2 shields, because you've got Wixwell shield and shield set. 3 more buffs. Well, Wixwell puts on increased defense. If eventually everyone gets intercept, so that makes 4. So if you've got one other champion in there doing like increased attack, all the teams I've shown have got like Hellborn Sprite, increased crit rate. Valerie, increased attack. Bacardi does 2. So most of the champions that do buff extension actually do give you 1 or 2 buffs. So I think 5 is a really fair number. In fact, I'd say minimum really on these teams, you should be getting 6.
This means that we're going to do a 3 times 5, and then that...
Okay, so I missed that. So actually, he gave us the number in the code, which is not apparent to everyone. So you get a 3% growth per buff. So literally just 3 times 5, and that's where he's getting his 15% growth each time Wixwell does his shield growth. So you can see here, the initial shield growth is actually quite small, 4,500, which is why some people lose one of their shields really early, because if you don't get decreased attack on from Wixwell, the clan boss can actually hit for a similar amount to what you're growing a shield by, especially if you've got the stun target taking a hit as well, and you're only on a 1-for-1 speed tune, so you're only getting this away once per rotation of abilities.
Percentage is what we're going to take from the current shield, which means that when I use my shield growth ability, the A2 for the first time, then I'm going to add 4,500 into that shield. Now, the next time I do it, well, assuming I take no damage, which is unlikely, but let's just assume that's the case, you have 34,500, which means that the next time I use the shield growth, it's going to increase to 5,175. Why? Because the original value in which I'm increasing it by has gone up because I added it on top. And this is where I'm saying it's kind of like a multiplication of a multiplier, because the value in which we are basing the addition is constantly being increased and incremented by the previous version of this. It's effectively...
He's right. So as soon as it starts to get to a point of high level growth, this then becomes, you're unkillable. You're absolutely unkillable. All I would counter that with, though, in my view here, is that you do need to set the team up to be able to withstand the start of the fight. And it's not hard. It's not hard, but you do need a certain level of shield. You do need a certain level of at least like a 2-for-1 speed tune. You know, is it any... I'd say it's slightly easier than a budget unkillable team to build and set up, but only by a bit. Only by a small amount. The speed tunes can be more relaxed than a budget unkillable. But I think other than that, you know, the gear sets and stuff... It's easier to get a 1 key from this than it is to get a 1 key from a budget unkillable, I guess. But yeah, the start is where you're in all your danger, because what he's not showing here is actually how much damage you're taking. And if you add 4.5k shield, but then you take, you know, like 3 hits before you apply any more shielding, then actually quite quickly you eat through the amount of shield you've added. So rather than added like 4.5k, 5.1, 5.9, it's probably more like 4.5k, 4.7, 4.9, but still eventually, as long as you keep that decreased attack on, when you get down towards like turn 20 or so, you massively outshield the damage that's coming in, which means then you can keep going forever.
I'm multiplying it twice. I'm multiplying it again, and I'm multiplying it again. I'm keep multiplying it. So even though every single time we go through this, we are increasing the shield sort of value, like this is like kind of how much we're increasing. So every step is basically 15% on the previous step. So when we use it for the 5th time, we're going to increase the amount we add to the shield by 15% from the 4th time. That's quite consistent. But when you actually do it from the original, so from the first initial usage of the shield up to the 10th, you can see that actually we've changed the amount we're adding per usage by 252%. Now, you might not think this is an awful problem, because maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, 15,000 is not a problem. But here's the thing. When you're fighting over 1,500 boss turns and you're resetting skill abilities, and because of the nature of an exponential growth, what you're actually getting is a significant sort of problem once you hit critical mass. Right, once you start getting down to the 30th usage, well, now we're actually increasing the shield by 259,000. And when you get to the 50th, now you're increasing it by 4.2 million. And when you get to the 60th, you're now increasing it by 17.1 million. And you see what I mean, why this is a bad programming. Because effectively, the 60th use, so the 17.1 million, basically equates to around about the first 55, I think it works out at. Something like, not quite the first 55, maybe the first 50. The first 50 usages, maybe a little bit less than that. Because
yeah, no, I get it. So I get what he's saying. From a coding point of view, this is not great for the game. I will say though, like if they decide they're going to change Wixwell based on Saph's feedback here, then they should have changed a bunch of the other stuff in the game. Like for me, if I'm thinking of like top 10 people that need a nerf at this moment in time, Wixwell is not on the list. Honest for me, like Wixwell does not feel like he's on the list. I guess the only thing which is perhaps a bit silly around the Wixwell stuff, because the clan boss thing is kind of like, well, once you've hit a 1 key, it's kind of like, so what? You know, I don't know. Is it too easy to do? Maybe it's too easy to do. I don't know. But for me, the bigger problem is where you've got a PvP element like Hydra. That's a much bigger challenge because, you know, and I do seriously think that my idea I threw out there the other day with a certain level of damage earns you a certain number of points is just a better way to go anyway. So like this guy here, Predator that we spoke about earlier, even though he got 105 billion, I just think that that would earn him a top point score. Or like, you know, it might be for the first like 100 million damage, or no, first like 30 million damage is like 1 point. The next 30 million damage, you get 2 points. The next 100 million damage, you get 3 points. Going up, and maybe this is like a 20-point score. So although it's still an insane score, 20 points, you know, versus you know, this one here, which got him say 4 points, it still means that other people, you know, he can't win it by himself, which is what he's doing right now. He's literally winning this whole competition by himself at the moment. His set of keys have won this competition in full, which is silly, right? But have we just added Wixwell in the mix, Acelin in the mix, all of these different like weird and wonderful comps that the community come up with, and it's cool, right? It's cool the community come up with this stuff. Have we just added another one in the mix with Wixwell? I guess let's get on to what he thinks the solution should be. And this is, I guess this is where people are saying, like at the moment he's just telling us what's going on, right? So let's see if this is why people are so outraged.
Well, what we should do is we should base Wixwell's shield growth on his defense value. Just how we base his shield on his defense value, we should.
So this is the same then as Brogni in effect. Brogni grows shield based on his hits. So the more damage you do, the more you will grow a shield. He's saying instead, I guess the cool thing with Brogni is you can then start to manipulate the situation, right? I get increased attack on, I get decreased defense and weaken on the boss. You know, there's a number of different ways that you can then make Brogni more effective. Whereas with Wixwell, it will be a set value, I guess.
Base the growth of that shield on its defense value. So what I would suggest is, for example, if we start,
I guess that's not fair though. You can still do defense buff, you can still do defense aura, but you can still bring in someone like Braga. There's a few ways, there's not many ways.
With something like a 6,000 defense, we have a defense buff that would give him about 9,600 defense. Say like we start with a shield value of, let's just keep it consistent on 30,000. Well, I would suggest we need to lift it up from a 3% to maybe a sort of a, I don't know, 15% to make it feel reasonable. And then when we grow it, you can see that initially we're going to get a pretty big addition. Let's do it with 5 buffs as well. Let's just do it like this number. The numbers could be varied, like you can do 15%, 20%, depending how you feel it works. But what you will notice here is the growth of the shield is not going to be as extreme when you get to the higher ends, but the initial growth is going to be better than the other side, right? Because we are essentially doing it off a fixed value. So every single time he uses this ability, so long as his defense stays the same and you have 5 buffs on the target, you will add the same amount to your shield every single time. And as you can see, the value becomes much healthier. If we compare this to a 88th usage, let's just do it to a clan boss 50 here, right? And let's just put this as a green cell here. Let's just hide these columns. Now you can see the difference in what I'm suggesting here is the fix. We're still creating a pretty healthy shield at 382,000, although that would be diminished by the damage, but it's not.
Yeah, the trouble is like it totally negates then a 1 key. This is what people are upset about. Like the way it grows right now, Wixwell becomes a 1 key champion because you do need to get to a high term limit with the comp to really start 1 key, and especially for the lower level comps. Whereas even though this sounds like a massive number, this has not included any of the damage that we're taking. And I don't think, because you're only ever adding 7,200 each time, So early on, it becomes better. Like he would actually get more benefit throughout the whole game. It'd be like running a Valk. You know, when Valk gives you that massive shield in the arena, or when Helicath gives you that massive shield as well. Not quite as big as Valk's, but that's what it would be. That would feel more like a Valk than someone that can like really specialize in an area of the game. So it would make him more versatile throughout the whole game. I'm not sure if that's the answer, honestly. It's difficult because I like the Wixwell comp, and I think it's fun. I really enjoy doing clan boss comps. That's like always been one of my most favorite areas of the game. But if I just take it from a pure technical point of view, get rid of all of my emotion, whether I like the comp or not. Get rid of all of my emotions. Probably makes more sense from a technical point of view. But I don't like the idea of it just destroying the teams that we're kind of like creating. So I'm not sure, Saph, on this one, mate. I think technical, yeah. Before he came into the game, should they have looked at this and thought that's just silly? Yes, of course they should. Like they should have done with a whole bunch of champions. Yeah, we've just got this insane power creep. The fact that he breaks clan boss is not such a big deal anymore, because clan boss is kind of like done and dusted content in a number of ways now. So it's just another champion on the list of done and dusted content. The fact that he's breaking Hydra, or with a certain comp, might be a reason that they actually decide to look at it. We'll see. But then, like I say, if they do that, they have to look at some other stuff as well. They've got to, because you know they've now kind of like laid their own bed. There's so many ways now that it's being broken that surely to just call one out is not fair either. So I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Should we fire Saph on the back of it? What I will say to this comment here, please fire Saph. This dude straight up sucks. Probably won't fire Saph. He's actually got a very good technical brain. And he's a 1 in a million, honestly, in terms of his knowledge. What a crazy idea to fire someone that's got a brilliant mind. He's trying to get Wix nerfed. Potentially he's trying to get him changed, or he thinks that the coding of Wixwell was poor. Yeah, okay. This line here, it helps non-Wales compete with him. Honestly, I see this so often on my like content. We couldn't care less about that. All literally we care about is, are they making a fun game for us to play on a day-to-day basis? Like that's it. That's honestly it. Like, oh, if someone's catching up with me on Clan Boss, do I care about that? Not one smithereen. Does Saph care about, you know, a newer player catching up with him on Clan Boss? He couldn't care less about that. Okay, he could not care less about that. It's such a weird comment to me that this keeps coming up. Oh, content creators, they want it all their own way so they can beat us newbies. No, we don't care about that. Honestly, it's not what it is. It's not what it is. You know, if it was a super broken arena champion, still, it's not what it is. We just want a nicely balanced, fun game. That's literally it. I don't know, guys. Should Saph be fired? For me, it's going to be a no. He keeps his job for another year. But it was an interesting review. I will say, like, the way he's kind of laid this out there to show why a unlimited growth of an ability is silly is actually very legit. Like, and actually for Fateless, we take it on board. These type of things are silly. Being able to be unkillable non-stop is silly. Having a shield that can grow to an infinite number is silly. Because the trouble is, what it does is it makes you have to make boss mechanics, which then find a way to make those things irrelevant anyway. We see it all the time. So now, how many bosses are ignoring unkillable buffs? How many bosses, you know, just strip away everything? They have to do that because of these poor decisions around coding in the game. You know, suddenly enemy max HP hits only do 10% damage because we've been able to find ways to make them do such silly damage that they're just one-shot bosses. Like, and actually what it does is it means that we end up getting super complex bosses that for a new player, they're almost impossible to do. So from a technical point of view, I totally get where Saph's going with this. But my personal view is Wixwell is not the issue here. Maybe he is, but I like him. I like that he's got a place in the game. And I like that, you know, the reason we originally kind of like called him out as a good champion still exists. So sorry, Saph, you can keep your job, but I don't agree. Anyway, there you go, guys. I've been Hell Hades. I'll see you later.